What's up, movie nerds and basketball geeks? Welcome back to Movie Ball. Jump scare! On today's episode, I'll be counting down my top 10 favorite horror movies of all time in spirit of Halloween. So, trick or treat. Here I got some candy for you, some Crunch Bars and Butterfingers. So, take some if you'd like. You literally can't. You cannot take any. I can't eat any with this fucking mask on. So yeah, I'll just count down from 10 to 1, you know how it goes, and I'll just throw out some honorable mentions to start it off. Also, one thing to keep in mind, horror is one of the most subjective genres of film there is, so our lists are going to look totally different, and even with that, there's so many subgenres of horror that some people consider horror, some people don't. It's just, there's a lot with horror, so just keep that in mind. I don't want to see someone in the comments being like, well, that's not horror. Well, I told you. But I think these all do make a compelling reason to be horror. I'm not going to include horror comedies, so you're not going to see anything like Zombieland or Piranha because I love those movies, but I don't consider them scary. Not that horror movies have to be scary. I mean, some of these movies on this list I don't find scary, but they're under the horror genre. So the first honorable mention that I want to throw out there is the first Hostel. This is a movie that was just thrown into the torture porn category just right off the bat, and while there is plenty of blood and guts and squeamishness to a lot of people, that is a lazy way of describing it because I think this movie really goes beyond that. Its bloody cruelty is very prevalent, and if you're bothered by slashers, this will turn you off big time. But I think it really does, it's not just about those disgusting moments and, stuff that makes you cringe, because Hostel has there's a realistic grittiness to this film that gets under people's skin because it is something that could potentially happen, It just kind of resonates with some people in a way that it's hard to watch because there is a realistic aspect of it. The second honorable mention is the second Conjuring, The Conjuring 2. Both Conjuring films have been, critically praised and audience adored, but I find that first Conjuring film very overrated. It's well made and finely directed, but it's really not much different. And the same could be said about The Conjuring 2, but I think there's just far scarier scenes and definitely more iconic moments. The Conjuring 2 is basically an Exorcist clone, one that kind of goes on for way too long, and as I said, doesn't do much new, but the devotion and care that James Wan puts into these Conjuring films elevates the material to another level. Sure, there might be some things that are pretty similar to other horror films out there, but the craftsmanship that James Wan, displays is just, it's next level. He really cares, and, you have some iconic scenes, like the nun scene, the nun painting scene that oh my god, dude. And then just some other shit as well. So yeah. And the third honorable mention I want to shout out is Sinister. This movie isn't perfect or amazing, but gave us a very, creepy look at homemade family murders, and there's an actual good story in here with good performances as well, which is something you can't say for 90% of horror films, so it's definitely a good late-at-night watch. Now, starting off the list at number 10, I have the original Unfriended. This is a movie that came out of nowhere and highly intrigued people, only to leave a lot of audience members uninterested. However, I think this found footage flick is extremely underrated and overlooked. People will easily write it off as just another dumb teenage slasher, much like people will, write Hostel off as just torture porn, but not only did Unfriended do something original with the dying found footage genre, it did something with the slasher film as well. It takes technology in the millennial life and utilizes that concept into an effective slasher. Unfriended is able to take the simple sounds of a MacBook or computer and make them very creepy and off-putting. It's disturbing just to hear those noises. It just makes you feel like something's not right. It creates this supernatural side of scares that feeds into the horror as well. It effectively touches on the themes of cyberbullying. It has a great, message in there. And it also invents all this juicy drama for the main characters to argue about that feels authentic, and it's done in kind of a natural way. I can understand why some people are put off by the slower and more, repetitive sides and nature of this story, but for me, it was right up my alley. Coming in at number 9 is this year's Child's Play. I know that might be insane to a lot of viewers out there, and this film plays with more of like a Gremlins type vibe than actual horror, but Child's Play 2019 is one of the most fun times I had at the theater this year. Not only is Chucky effectively upgraded and reboot into the modern era, the film is filled with quotable lines, great kills, and an actual understanding of where Chucky is coming from when he turns sinister. There's a lot of laughs and thorough entertainment the entire way through, and I know people, especially die-hard fans of the original Child's Play series, found this remake to be pretty stupid, but I thought it was a lot more realistic than some magic spell putting an actual human being into a doll, so I can't with this fucking mask anymore. Jesus Christ, I'm dying. I'm sweating up a storm. Woo! Landing in at number 8 is Paranormal Activity 2. Paranormal Activity 2 is a more than worthy sequel that is able to recapture that frightening dread and tension that the first one built so effortlessly. The fear of the unknown and using your imagination to fulfill what's lurking in the dark, Paranormal Activity 2 also adds enough new ideas to differentiate itself enough from its predecessor, all while giving us one of the best horror movie endings I have ever seen. And right in front of the second installment at number 7 is Paranormal Activity 3. The Paranormal Activity series is my favorite horror series of all time, and these are easily the best sequels, although I do have a soft spot for all of them. Paranormal Activity 3 does so much right as a sequel to a horror franchise. It adds new and purposeful ideas to the series, such as the oscillating camera fan, and not only does it do that, but it answers questions, it expands the Paranormal Activity lore, and keeps the same general formula intact for fans of the first two films. So it just, I'm just so impressed, or I was so impressed, seeing this film that, for a series that was totally unintended and not supposed to happen, that they were able to, stretch it out and make things work. I like it. I just got a glass of water. I'm fucking sweating. I feel like I'm gonna fucking pass out. Coming in at number 6 is the 2017 remake of Stephen King's It. There is nothing remotely scary about this film to me. Although it does have a devilishly strange, iconic villain in Pennywise, who is at times very creepy but very fun. This movie's just a blast from start to finish. Although this movie never did it for me with its horror aspect, it's just a barrage of fun and youthful integrity. It's just a movie that keeps me smiling. It's very quotable, and although it doesn't keep me up at night, it's something that I do highly enjoy. Starting off the top 5 is the original Insidious. Unlike the Paranormal Activity sequels, the Insidious sequels have been very lackluster and they just didn't do it for me, but that doesn't take away from the fact that the first Insidious was a very eerie tale. Insidious was different enough with its astral projection ideas. That was something we never really saw explored, and with James Wan at the helm again, you're going to see that, artistry and, care to a film that just, brings the movie higher, and he delivers on that. This movie was just, it made that song Tiptoe Through the Tulips just such a creepy tune and disturbing and unsettling. And, with that final act, a lot of people seemed that it went a little over the top. That's how they felt. But for me, it fit nicely and it was still scary. My 4th favorite horror film of all time should make the horror old heads more appreciative of this list, as we have John Carpenter's The Thing. A frigid climate filled with paranoia and stress, The Thing is an atmospheric nightmare, giving us practical effects that prove scarier and more unsettling than CGI ever could. Almost 40 years later, this film still holds up, and if you've never seen this Kurt Russell classic, I highly suggest checking it out, as it's a very good blend of sci-fi horror, and it's the tension is just masterfully built. It's a prime example of that. John Carpenter knows how to do that, and it's great. Coming in at number 3, I have the 2017 debut of Jordan Peele, Get Out. This was one of my favorite movies of that year, and although it isn't scary in the least bit, at least to a white ass like myself, it was still an amazingly fun movie that kept you entertained the entire way through. Yes, I don't think it's scary, but it's a movie that proved to be a fascinating twist and blend of, some comedy in there. I said I wasn't putting horror comedies, but it's not comedy. It has laughs. And, it's a social satire on race, and all while being, effective and entertaining and making you cheer and stand up and just enjoy yourself the whole way through. So Get Out had to be on this list. Coming in at number 2, I have one of the original goats of horror, and that is The Exorcist, a movie that's 50 years later still scares the shit out of me. I have some problems with The Exorcist. It can drag on at points with an overlong runtime and unnecessary sequences, but 1973's The Exorcist essentially created the demonic possession genre and basically just scared the shit out of everyone, an entire nation. I have some friends that watch it now and are kind of, bored by it and don't think it's that scary. And to a degree, I understand, but not for me. This movie, it's just so iconic. So many iconic lines. Just scary as fuck. Like, I don't know, man. Like, that shit, I think about it and I'm just like, fuck. It's scary as shit. That's all I can say. The Exorcist is a GOAT and it's my number two. And my number one favorite horror movie of all time is, if you haven't already guessed it, Paranormal Activity. To a lot of people, they might roll their eyes at this one, but for me, this is a masterpiece. I wasn't really into horror movies when this came out, and, I was a pussy. Everything scared me, and I remember the hype for this movie, like, just came out of nowhere. And it was so effective because it made me, a pussy, want to venture out into the horror world and be like, I can handle this. I can take this on. I got this. I'll do it. And I couldn't. After seeing this movie, I slept in my parents' room for 2 weeks. I wanted the nightmares that Paranormal Activity was essentially guaranteeing, and goddamn, like, this movie is iconic because it people used to sleep with the door open when they were scared, but it got me to close that shit and lock the fuck out of it because this movie, it gets me every time I watch it. I know what's going to happen, and I still, you've got a great horror film when you know what's going to happen, but you feel like you don't because you're so on edge and everything's so tense and you're still so scared and you're like this and you want to look away but like you can't help it. And Paranormal Activity does that to me every time I watch it. It always affects me. I get goosebumps, shivers. It gets under my skin every single time. It just felt so real. That was the whole point of like the found footage thing. And I know the Blair Witch Project created the found footage genre, but Paranormal Activity, it took the found footage genre, it perfected it, it popularized it, and it just felt so authentic. And, we didn't know these people, never saw these actors before. It just felt real, felt scary. I get goosebumps thinking about it right now. I'm telling you, dude. Like, this movie scares the shit out of me. It is my number one favorite horror film of all time. Absolutely terrifying for me. Not everyone, but me. Hell yeah. So that is my top 10 horror films of all time. There are so many subgenres of horror, and that's why it's hard. It's such a subjective genre, like I said, so our lists aren't going to look the same, but these are the 10 that resonate with me the most, whether for sheer horror or just plain creativity or fun. Smash that like button. Fucking the power of Christ compels that like button. Exercise that like button. I don't even want to fucking talk about that shit. That shit is, it's scary. Like, so, yeah, that's Halloween.